Happy Monday, guys.
It is officially a couple of
Yes.
things have happened. We've watched the Super Bowl, Valentine's Day, and Happy Sad have come and gone, and we find ourselves on another Monday Rundown. Welcome to the Monday Rundown, guys, where Winston and I get to talk. That's Winston. I'm Janelle. Where we get to talk about all the things that we don't normally get to talk about on our Wednesday shows, which are usually earmarked towards entrepreneurship. So you guys are bringing us some great topics. Keep bringing those topics. They're wonderful. And what we do is we look to other content creators, other thought leaders on the subject matter. So that way we can all learn and grow together. It is a lot of fun for us.
Let's jump into today's topic, guys.
What mistakes do we make in choosing a partner? Probably several. I would love for us to jump to the being awkward and quirky stage as quickly as possible. I think in the beginning there is people are trying to be perfect or like they're trying to be their best selves, and which leads to the other person now thinking you're one way, but it turns out you're actually not as smooth. And then it almost feels like, well, then who are you then? Like, who's this person that I'm with? Because I was falling in love with that other person, but this is now weird. And so I think one of the mistakes that we do when we're choosing is that we try to like be like our like most perfect selves. And I think it's happening both at the same time. And so both people end up making choices that are based on something that's not necessarily the most accurate or the most genuine, like who the person is. So I think that probably is one of the biggest things for me when I think about it. And Winston, I'm really curious to know what your thoughts are.
No, that's actually a really good one. I would definitely second that. I use the term your representative. So people send their representatives on dates, but I do like how you described it. It is this not almost facade, because I don't think it's like a complete, I mean, maybe for some people it's like completely fallacy, but I think for some it is just actually, you know what? So Jeannie watches this show. I don't know if I've brought this up before, but they pop balloons. It's like a modern day dating show, right? So instead of, remember old time used to have three or women on one side of a screen, the person asking questions. Hey, what would you do on our first date? And the person would answer. In this now, they're doing this in a lineup format, and either a man speaking to a bunch of women or a woman speaking to a group of men have balloons. And what's cool is the person with the balloon has also the option to pop before the person asking the questions comes over and says, hey, I'm not interested in you. So it's actually mutual in the sense that as a contestant looking for a partner, I can be standing there with the balloon and say, hey, the person that's being offered up as a date, I'm not interested, so I'm going to bow out and pop the balloon. Does that make sense?
Okay.
And the person who's asking the questions, looking for a partner as well, can also have the opportunity to go, hey, you're not for me, for whatever variety of reasons.
Okay, so the lineup of people, each one of them is holding a balloon.
Has the balloon, yes. And the person that's the woman or man has a mic. They have the opportunity to ask questions and vice versa, right? What I've often thought was interesting in, and I've made comments to her as she watches this, is I'm judging these people on the way they're dressed, because I take it as this is a first date. And some of the things that people come show up as or show up in, I'm just like, I just don't think that's an appropriate first date, whether it's too comfortable or too classy. One of the either way, I comment on something as simple as that. And even something like that to me stands out, because it's almost like, again, there's this idea of you come in like a full, I mean, I've seen women dressed up in ways I'm like, oh, it's so interesting. I wonder if they'd really show up on a first day dressed that way, or is this now a little bit of, hey, I'm on a TV show, so I'm gonna show out, or however. Some women have, and I've seen this, turn down the man because they're like, oh, he's too dressed down. Maybe the same kind of energy. It's like, oh, if this was you taking me out, is that how you would have shown up? on the date. And I know for some people that's that right there is I'm not even interested because you didn't even take the effort, or you know what I mean, whatever the case may be. All of that to say, I think in choosing a partner, and something that you brought up, I do think that there are things that are going to come up in a relationship that you won't have an opportunity to address on a first, second, or third date, just because you're not in those situations. So you really don't know how a person's going to handle that. And we kind of go through this process of asking questions of a person, and they may not really know like how to answer that.
That's true.
Or they or you know what? No, or they're going to give you an answer that maybe in the moment is where they really are. And then when presented with that actual problem or challenge, they completely respond differently than you believe. So to the question, what mistakes we make in choosing a partner, I mean, choosing someone that you know you're not actually attracted to, or can see, like if you're choosing somebody that from the get-go you don't see how it would work, I think that's probably a mistake in itself. Like if from the outset you have reservations, I think trying to convince yourself that those things won't continue, or you'll be able to change someone or some, I just don't think that's the best way to start a relationship. I do like how you or what you said about, I think it's something where if you're meeting someone, come as who you really are, and allow as the relationship to develop for you to, because I do know there's a sense of, I don't want to be too open, whether it's physically or emotionally. I don't want to be too open. I do want to keep certain things in. And I'm not necessarily opposed to that, because I think you don't want to necessarily, what's the word? I think people should earn certain information, and as you continue to come and be who you really are, I think it then allows for somebody to say, you know what, we've gone on a few dates now. Let me talk about this part of my life. We've done this now. Let me share this part of my life. To say that there's a perfect roadmap to what that looks like, I don't have the answers for any of those things. I don't know what someone's comfort level is. I think to each our own in that sense. I think you're going to share what you feel comfortable with, but I do think you should be your authentic self at all points. And if that means, hey, I pick my teeth or whatever that thing is, I think you should just let the person see who you are, so that they can make an informed decision, to your point earlier, like so that they're not whatever gaslit or whatever the case may be. Just always be who you are and let the person make the best decision that they can make with that information.
Agreed. All right. But like I said, it's not just us.
Yeah.
We're going to hear from somebody else, a group of people, some thought leaders, or just our favorite group of people. We're going back to the school of life.
Love these guys.
To hear what they have to say. We love how they break these things down. And so here we go.
Take us to school.
Choosing a long-term partner may be the single most consequential decision that any of us ever has to make. No wonder we can get a little scared on dates. If we get the choice right, we may enjoy supportiveness, coziness, and intimacy for the rest of our lives. If we get it wrong, our confidence, health, financial wherewithal, and sanity will be on the line. England's greatest novelist, Jane Austen, spent her career writing almost exclusively about her characters' quests to locate a suitable mate. As critics have pointed out, in the world outside her study, Britain was fighting a war of survival against Napoleonic France. But Austen never saw fit to mention the conflict even once. So busy was she telling us about who blushed on seeing whom at which party. One might smirk, but her priorities may have been correct. War is indeed a very serious matter. Choosing a partner is a properly monumental one. What then are some of the most weighty mistakes we make when attempting to find a lover? Firstly, our terror of loneliness. Much of the reason for our unhappy romantic lives comes down to our dread of the single state. So terrified are we of our own company and of the persistent humiliations of the dating rigmarole, we become fatefully generous towards mediocre partners who may, over time, end up making us feel far lonelier and more miserable than if we were merely on our own. The single greatest guarantor of contented love is a capacity to endure one's own company. Secondly, the sunk cost fallacy. We stay because we've already been here for so long, because it's already far too late, given that we're 21 or 39 or 104. We think relentlessly of the 3 months, 5 years, or 2 decades that we've already spent with a person, with all the hope implied, and thereby overlook that a short, happy future is always worth more than a lengthy, fractious past. We forget, too, that though people may occasionally change, they seem never to do so when one politely asks them to. Thirdly, muddled assumptions of better alternatives. Of course, they are a bit awful. The question is whether one's dealing with an especially obtuse sort or just another member of our collectively maddening species. We're always choosing from a pool, and we need, to a maximal extent, to know what other kinds of creatures swim in it. Our level of calm years from now is going to depend on having built up, through experience, a fair and robust sense of what an acceptable degree of frustration might be. Anyone can find someone annoying. The true skill is to have determined the relative inevitability of their vexatiousness, to know how to distinguish hysterical misery from normal, unavoidable unhappiness. A hatred of love. We may spend a great many years pushing away anyone with the gall to try to love us. Our repulsion tends to have its roots in difficult childhoods, in which we built up an association between intimacy on the one hand and pain on the other, between closeness and suffering. We now suspect that anyone who is sweet must be deluded for identifying in us a lovability that we don't recognize in ourselves. Happy love may be what we crave. It isn't necessarily what we can remotely tolerate. Fifthly, the appeal of madness. It can take a long time to develop immunity to the appeal of those who blow hot and cold, hate themselves, refuse our affections, deceive us, and fall into rages and despair late at night. We may be deep into middle age before we cotton on to the extraordinary merits and subtle exoticism of the sane, reliable, boring people who trust others, go to psychotherapy, garden, like themselves, and love their parents. Sixthly, the tragedies of defensiveness. It's the character trait that single-handedly dooms more relationships than any other, and means that when one gently raises a complaint against a partner, they reply that this isn't a good time, that it's one's own fault, that there's in fact no problem, that one's being mean, and that this is all too much. It's a blessed day when one lands on a human who, thanks to the love of early caregivers, utters the magic words. How interesting. I hear you. You might have a point. Let me have a think about what you're saying. Underestimating the cumulative impact of character flaws. We tell ourselves that it's only a little thing, just a small tendency in them to do X or Y or Z. Then again, a pebble is also only a very small thing, but if we have one in our shoe and we're running a marathon, after a mile, our foot's going to be soaked in blood. Eighthly, underestimating physical attraction. It's a criterion that clever people like us are especially prone to neglecting. Surely sexual appeal shouldn't detain us for too long when choosing a mate. Surely there are more important things to think at length about than who might be submissive or who dominant. But this is to overlook how many arguments are at heart about a resentment over absent sex, and conversely how much one can forgive a mate after a satisfying 20 minutes together. Given that sex is, unlike good conversation or advice, typically the only thing that we're not legitimately allowed to seek outside a couple, we should make sure that the kind we're having in it is uncommonly satisfying. Ninthly, perfectionism. Our chances of making a good enough choice increase the more we recognize the impossibility of making a perfect one. Our marriages improve as we concede that we will naturally, inevitably, marry slightly the wrong person, but only because there's no such thing as the fully right sort. Gods can marry paragons. We're fated to have to cope with just another demented, sweet, silly fool, much like us. The most contented marriages rest on a bed of consoling, forgiving, gentle, laughter-filled pessimism.
Yeah. If you guys peep that School of Life just told you how long to make love, 20 minutes.
That's what you got out of this?
I love it. No. I was good with 1 and 2. I was like, oh, these are some really good. But then when they said that, I've all the rest of them wiped out. I was like, oh yeah, well done, School of Life. Well done. But I definitely agree with them, and with obviously much of what they said. But that one for sure, I do think there are, and many people have talked about this before. Just the idea of it's easier to get over certain things where there's obviously that physical attraction, but when there isn't that opportunity to, like they said, reconnect with the person that you've decided is the only partner I'm physically engaging with, it lets a lot of those other things wear on you. And I know we had talked about Michael's book last week. Shout out to Michael Taki and his new book, The 13 Keys of Love Together. But he had talked about, well, actually, I don't know if he had gotten into this in our interview with him, but just, I do know, and maybe this is a male perspective, that a lot of marital issues come from a lack of intimacy. Actually, I think we've even seen it on, what's her guy, The Diary of CEO? I'm going to say Trevor Noah. Thank you. You got me now with the Trevor Noah thing. But he had interviewed a woman, and she had talked about that, where for a lot of men, that does seem to be a large area of sadness or loneliness. It's just they're in relationships or marriages, but they aren't having their physical needs met, and still having to provide and do other, not just provide financially, but just other things in terms of that. But that's something that's not being taken care of.
What episode is that? I've never watched an episode where that was talked about.
Oh, I can share it with you. There's one where there's like a whole no fat month, and this woman was talking about the female orgasm, and sharing some of her. She actually shed a lot of light, and we've talked in the past about actually one of our highest viewed Monday rundowns was the discussing female pleasure and things like that. But she talked about different lengths of orgasm for women and different things that just I'll link the video. I won't get into it today, but I'll link the video. But to what you just asked, I watched another interview after, not the same woman. Unfortunately, I don't remember her name, but he had like a little bit of a round table with some doctors, and they were discussing just that idea of, that one was specifically about some religious components having to do with masturbation and how it's discouraged, but they have found through science-based research that it's actually hurting people in some instances to not do it because of the belief systems that people are creating around the idea of masturbation and things like that, and how they've described that it can be a very healthy thing to do, especially even within a relationship. Partners are able to do things like that with themselves or with each other, excuse me. But I'll share with you, and I can definitely link it. I'll link it in one of those videos, because there are 3 I'm referring to right now. And
apparently one of them talks about how men aren't receiving the sex that they want.
Oh yeah. You've never heard that?
No. Sorry.
Oh wow.
Have I heard that in my life? Yes. Have I heard in any of the interviews on the Diary of CEO? No.
Oh yeah. I can. Well, I'll definitely share it with you. I'll share.
What I hear in the Diary of CEO is how men aren't having partners. Period. There's a significant number of men right now in Western civilization who are partnerless. So that's why they're not having sex.
Oh, didn't you remember? Oh, it wasn't a woman. I'm sorry. It was the guy that was doing the divorce. I know we've looked at this. The guy was talking about reasons why people are divorced. And he was saying when people come into his office, some of the things that he goes for, most of the men that are there going through the whole divorce thing, it's not the financial, it's not something, he goes, it's literally them talking about, the lack of sex in the relationship, or why they cheat, things like, again, I'm belaboring the point. I will share the video with everyone so that you can just see it yourself. Because I know I'm mashing together 3 different interviews. The one I just mentioned with that the divorce lawyer, the other with the doctor who was talking about female orgasms and different components of that, and then another one where he had a round table and they were talking about masturbation and components of that as well, in religion and different things like that. I'll
Shout
share
out
all
to
three.
Stephen Bartlett. If you ever
Yeah.
watch this, thank you for everything you do, sir. We really value a lot of the interviews that you have done.
Yeah, no, really good content there.
Yeah.
But what were your thoughts? I know I've gone on.
I wrote them down. The ones that stood out to me was assuming better alternatives, I think, is a thing, especially for me,
grass is greener.
as I'm single right now, right? And I think that happens a lot with all of the dating apps.
What does that mean though? You mentioned the date. Sorry, you mentioned what do you mean? Like, oh, this date is cool, but I might find a better one if I stay on.
I could find somebody better. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Like, so then you're more likely to like not be empathic, to not deal with the fact that they're imperfect, because you just assume, well, there's better alternatives. So why do I have to deal with this person who like snores or like eats with their mouth open or whatever, right? Like,
and is the ease that the date can be gotten allow for that to kind of like, oh, I could just swipe it or whatever the case may be?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The dating apps perpetuate that. It's this idea like, oh, I can just go back and find somebody else on the dating app and right, like there's this endless possibility type thing.
A pool of people. Yeah. I get it.
And the other for me was actually the same thing that you said, underestimating physical attraction. Yes to leading to sex, but it's so funny. You went straight to so I laughed. I was like, that's what you got from that. To me, it's like, but it's the preamble before the sex. Like, if I'm not really physically attracted to you, but like you check off all these other boxes, again, speaking from experience, it's not going to work, because ultimately, like, I'm like forcing myself to have sex with you. I don't know many guys who are like okay with the woman having to force herself to have sex with him. There are probably some men, after I said that out loud, there are probably some men that
I'm about to say,
that don't mind that. But I think most men, or a lot of men, want to feel desired. So having a woman who doesn't desire them probably doesn't feel good.
It's so interesting that you bring it up, because to me there's and I can only speak from the seat I'm in, I have found, and I may have shared the story at one other point, but I remember at one point doing real estate and was walking past a woman that for myself I didn't think was very attractive, and it was mostly because of how she was presenting herself. She had like her stomach, a larger stomach than whatever, healthy and so on, but it was hanging out of her shirt. She was wearing really short cut off. She was exposing her assets. I'll put it that way. And I was thinking, in my mind, I literally, as I saw this person, I was like, oh wow, that's so interesting that she's out here like this. What was so funny to me was there were a group of guys that were catcalling her. And I thought to myself that because they're doing this, I thought it supported her continuing to present herself that way. And I remember commenting to somebody that I was with there, like, no matter how unattractive we may think that woman looks, this woman would have an easier time finding a sexual partner than a more attractive man would, simply because of the fact that more men would be willing to sleep. I almost think of it as men have lower standards than women. I'll put it that way.
That is correct.
That's
as long as she's got a punani, we're good to go.
Wow.
Is how men like that's how I see it with men anyway. Like,
no. That's a very true identification of that. And and I thought to myself, man, but if she was held to the standard that men have to carry themselves with, she wouldn't allow herself to look like this, or at least present herself. Let me not judge how she chose to have her body. That's on her. But she at least wouldn't present herself as such. Because as a guy, I just know, I just think earlier in life, I got the idea of muscles, these are things that would only build on whatever it is that I have going for me. Because some things you can't, help how your face, whatever. But there are other, if you can control it, you should. And so I definitely know it's helped, and I'm grateful for it, because I'm not sad about any of those things. But I do think it's easier for a woman to find a sexual partner, not loving and all those other things. I'm just referring to sexual partner, than I do think it is for
if
probably a
she
more
was like,
attractive man.
if she just wanted some D, but most of them,
Okay.
that's the difference.
This topic clearly brings out some terminology I've never heard Janelle use. The P and the D. Oh man, that's good though. Oh my god. Drop it in the chat, whatever you guys, some other acronyms for these
I'm crying.
for this word. That's funny.
Okay. You might have to close out.
Guys, if you got no, did you have anything else you wanted to say though about that? You're good? Okay, cool. All right, guys, this has definitely been another fun one. Let us know what your thoughts were on the video from School of Life. We absolutely always appreciate what they have to say. But until we see you guys next time, as always, remember, you deserve the good life. And keep your P and your D to yourself. Say that.